Today we will begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. Before the actual class, I would like to make a few announcements. First of all, it is a practice announcement. Between 1 to 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, for 4 hours, the whole Sangha over here will be practicing on the unfetterment mantra, the mantra of unfettering. I have already translated the sadhana for everyone, and you probably already have it, right? The mantra of unfettering, and the sadhana will be practicing it for 4 hours. Everyone is going to practice it tomorrow. In terms of the merit and the quality of this particular mantra and sadhana, there are some italics behind the actual sadhana explaining them. Specifically, it talks about how in the dark age, when there are various kinds of curse and black magic or occult, they have various kinds of black magic where they would place the name or hair or nail at a crossroad in various methods. So there are different methods of doing so by placing those underneath a stupa or so. On top of that, there are all kinds of non-humans and various kinds of bondages that could be caused by illness or obstacles. All of those obstacles can be unfettered by this mantra. Some people told me that they feel that this mantra is very difficult to chant, but after you get familiar with it, it's really not that difficult. The Surangama Sutra, the Great Compassion Sutra, those are really long, but this mantra is not that long. So try your best to finish 10,000 times as soon as possible. If you really couldn't do it, but at least try to join in and chant as much as possible. Because we have such a large Sangha to chant it together, then the merit is also quite great. In terms of the sadhana, you will be able to know how to chant it and how to practice it along with the whole Sangha tomorrow. You can listen to it in your radio as well. You can look at the mantra itself first, and then knowing that this particular sadhana was composed by Mipa Rinpoche, 然后念7遍以上的，然后这个就周易就加持，就是这个金刚带，就是然后带在身上的话。There are lots of mantras after practicing it for 7 times, and then you can wear it. You can wear the Vajrayana that you practiced with certain mantras, or if you were to chant the mantra and blow a breath onto the water, then you can drink that. It also has the quality of giving blessings. I'm sure tomorrow after chanting it for 4 hours, you will be able to get very familiar with this practice. You will definitely be able to know that. So I'm not going to elaborate too much on the merits of it. Now let us start our class on Surangama Sutra. The Surangama Sutra was started back in 2019. We started a few classes, I wrote down in my note that on October 22nd, 2019 was the last class back then. And then I wrote over there on my note saying that, well, now we have put a pause to this teaching. I will see everyone next year. But 2020 was a halt, 2021 and 2022, so it's already been 3 years. Back then in 2019, the number of logins who were listening to this class real time were 47,105. Of course, those are just the login names, and there are more people listening because there are sometimes more people using only one ID to listen. But now we know that there are very little, a very small amount of people who are listening to this class now. I remember that on the 22nd, I give the class on Surangama Sutra, and then the second day I give class on the flight of the Garuda, and then I give the teaching on the 3 strikes on the vital point, which then concluded the teaching of that year. All the way since then, we haven't started the Surangama Sutra. We completed the Uttara Tantra Shastra last year, but we persevered through. We finished those teachings already. It's been 3 years since we last studied the Surangama Sutra, but now we have only a small number of people. When I first started the class, I was quite happy because many people were studying this text, but because of the causes and conditions, it seems that that's all we got so far. That's all we can have right now. If there are more obstacles were to happen in the future, even if only a few people left to listen to this teaching, I will definitely try my best to finish giving the teaching to you, and then eventually, hopefully, you will receive the audio tapes. Anyhow, I hope we can start well and finish well. We can finish everything thoroughly. And with that aspiration, I ask the 3 jewels and the protectors to give us teachings. In the later part of this text is actually not that difficult, so we can go a little faster. But the beginning part is a bit more difficult. Therefore, we will spend a little more effort. You know that in the Chinese Chan tradition, they say that the Lotus Sutra is the sutra that leads to enlightenment, and the Surangama Sutra is the sutra that could lead one to come to full realization. I'm sure with such Supreme Sutra, there are great blessings. At the same time, we probably will go through some obstacles. But for those obstacles, for the diligent ones, I'm sure the diligent ones won't be stopped by those obstacles. So I will try my best, and we should all try our best to complete the studying of Surangama Sutra altogether. In terms of the oral transmission, because I have not received the full oral transmission, when the Chankhya Ropé Dorje translated the Surangama Sutra into Tibetan language, there are the 2 chapters. I also saw that in the Dege version of Tripitaka included the 2 chapters, but in terms of the entire oral transmission of the Surangama Sutra, I have not found it so far. There are 2 current complete translation of Surangama Sutra into Tibetan language, one of which is translated by by Tutanima Rinpoche. So in terms of oral transmission, I only have the later Tibetan oral transmission of the 2 chapters in the middle. But before that, I'm not going to give oral transmission. To myself, I have already tried to read as many commentaries as possible because the sutra is very well known and there are many commentaries that's very well known. I hope that those of you who are listening and studying the Surangama Sutra can also study other commentaries too, so that you can delve into the depth of the Dharma. Especially since we have this opportunity to study Surangama Sutra, we will definitely have the opportunity to propagate this teaching. Many great masters had propagated this Surangama Sutra, many in the past and many in the modern times as well. And the Surangama Sutra is placed at the great importance to every practitioner. Therefore, we should definitely try our best to study Surangama Sutra as much as possible. The content today should be easy to understand, so I'm going to give teachings without too much stories or quoting from sutras. So previously, our last class, which was 3 years ago, we stopped at the place where it says that to cause all living beings in the 10 directions to obtain the wondrous, subtle, secret, the pure nature and bright mind, and to attain the pure eye, where the main discussion was the obstacle of Ananda, and then the Buddha's answers to it to address the question. And the way he addressed it was through the 7 ways of looking for the mind. In the next part, we will start to look at the 10 ways of pointing to the mind. They are the direct pointing out of the mind. So we can call it as a direct pointing out instructions. Such as, though appear, but the nature is immovable, though it appears, but the nature does not transmigrate, though it appears, but the nature does not have any intrinsic existence. All of those talks about though things appear, but the nature is not existent. I feel that this pointing out is very similar to the common Vajrayana direct pointing out, though a bit different to that of the Mahayana pointing out. So this kind of pointing out instructions given in Surangama Sutra is a public teaching. You don't need to go through empowerments nor the 500,000 of preliminary practices. Everyone could listen and everyone could study. So I think it would be easier for the students as well. Through these kinds of direct pointing out method, we can also attain liberation. We can also attain realization. This is such a profound way of pointing out to Ananda by the Buddha. This is such a profound method. Therefore, through our studying, though some places could be a little bit difficult to understand, maybe because I had not received the full oral transmission, maybe that's why I feel it's a little bit foreign to me. But when we study, we all need to pay great attention, be very attentive, and then also go through other commentaries as much as possible, as there are many commentaries available, let it be of the ancient times or of the modern times. And then you can come to your own understandings too. You can develop your own realization and insights of it. So let us then continue with the text. Let's look at the 10 ways of pointing to the mind. Now Buddha started asking Ananda, saying that you have told me that you saw my fist of light, of the bright light. At that time, Buddha asked Ananda, saying that, well, so now you've seen my fist of light, of this bright light. After making his fist into light, at that time his fist is exuberating light. And then showed it to Ananda and the rest fist of the Sangha members. Then the Buddha continued to ask, saying that, well, how did it take the form of a fist? How did the fist become bright? By what means could you see it? The Buddha asked him 3 questions. Can you answer me these 3 questions? Or by what means could you, or how does the fist take it in this form of a fist? How did the fist become bright? By what cause and conditions does the fist come to this form? By what cause and condition does the brightness comes to being? Also, by what means could you see this bright fist? Those are the 3 questions asked by the Buddha to Ananda. I think at that time, when the Buddha used his body, used his fist to expound the teaching, which is exactly what we use to point out the mind as well. For example, Pamasambhava, he would point his fingers into the space, saying that, where is the mind? Where can you see the mind? Or whenever we look at the moon, the space, or look at light, including crystal during empowerments, or sometimes in empowerments, the guru would take off the shirt and then ask the disciples to look at the body, and then say that, what do you see? What can you see? Especially some of the four ningtis empowerments, there are lots of the direct pointing method like such. This is very similar. So the Buddha also, he used his hand, used this fist to give pointing out to Ananda and the fellow Sangha members. To us, let us be the spiritual teacher or the Dharma teacher, whosoever you are. If you can use your hand, your fist, though it's not bright, exuberating light like the Buddha, but at least you can point to your fist and you can ask your disciple saying that, well, what kind of shape do you see? Now, by what means can you see my fist? So you can start asking those questions. You can ask what are the causes and conditions that you can see this form of the fist, and what are the causes and conditions that that brings the means for you to see it. Of course, because of the Buddha would use various methods to liberate various disciples according to their capacity. Therefore, every disciple would probably perceive the fist in very different ways. However, when the Buddha asked a question, I think the majority of us would reply by saying that, well, I see the Buddha's fist through my eyes. That's the means, that's the method I can perceive it. So the Buddha asked these questions, what are the causes and conditions that comes to taking this form of fist? And then Ananda replied the Buddha, saying that the body of the Buddha is born of purity and cleanness, and therefore it assumes the color of Jambudvipa's gold with deep red hues. Ananda saying that, well, I noticed that the body of the Buddha is of great magnificence. It is so beautiful. The color is just like the gold of Jambudvipa. So the gold of Jambudvipa, there are different ways of explaining it. Why Jambudvipa? Usually it is said that the gold in other places is not as beautiful as Jambudvipa. And the gold in Jambudvipa during the time of the Buddha is the best type of gold. They're the most magnificent. They're the most magnificent. They're not the gold that we have nowadays. There are the descriptions like such. So over here, Ananda said that the Buddha's body is just like the Jambudvipa's gold with a reddish hue. And it is so magnificent, just as a jeweled mountain. Hence, it shone as brilliant and dazzling as a precious mountain. It was actually, my eyes saw the Buddha bend his 5 wheeled fingers to form a fist, which has shown to all of us. So your fist come to this form because of these cause and conditions. So Ananda replied the question posed by the Buddha in this answer, which addressed also the previous 2 questions as well. So that's the first try of answering the Buddha's question. He said that I use my eyes to see the Buddha bend his 5-wheeled fingers to form a fist, which was shown to all of us. Ananda also said that, well, if you were to ask the means I used to see this beautiful fist of Buddha, I use my eyes. The 5 wheel fingers curled up to form this fist. Throughout this, then the fist was shown to all of us. Well, the answer was correct to our understanding, isn't it? It's quite accurate. If we were there, we would probably also see that and reply in such a way. Tokuachu sometimes would also tell the fortunate disciples by saying that, oh, do you see the Samadabhadra's form? And do you see this form of my body? And do you see this mandala of my body? And he would use such a way to give direct pointing out to fortunate disciples. Of course, there are people who couldn't really see those at all, but there are people, but some of them, because they want to save face, and they would just start to boast what they see. But in general, the great realized ones, their form or their certain kinds of manifestation or their way of, for example, manifesting the fist are performed or demonstrated in such ways to benefit sentient beings, just like how the Buddha curled his fingers and formed the fist to demonstrate his teaching. And over here, Ananda said that I see the fist of the Buddha through my eyes. This is correct. This is not wrong. We probably also think in such a way. And then the Buddha told Ananda, today the Tathagata will tell you truly. So the Buddha said that I will tell you the answer with truthful, with my truthful words. Now the Buddha said that all those with wisdom are able to achieve enlightenment through the use of examples. Those with wisdom, according to some commentaries, it says that it refers to the group of people with middling capacity. Of course, because the most supreme capacity, wise ones, they don't even need to listen to the examples. They would be able to understand the meaning of the Buddha's teaching when the Buddha just lifted his feast that radiate light. They would right away be able to understand the teaching of the Buddha. Whenever we study the Mahayana teachings, also lots of the Vidyadharas, the great masters, they would also use some examples or some instruments and implements, especially during the Vajrayana empowerments. All kinds of examples are used during the pointing out instructions, such as the method of gazing just like an elephant or like a sage. These kinds of methods are used to point out the nature of mind. Those are the signs that's used by the Vidyadharas to give teachings. In the Chinese tradition, the Chinese chant tradition, sometimes there are teachings like that. If you were to look through those koans, you would notice that some very strange things that's conducted or done by the teacher, and then right away the disciple would attain liberation or attain realization. Or sometimes realize the master scolding the disciple, and right at the moment of scolding the disciple would come to full enlightenment. That could also be possible. Or in the Tibetan tradition, Milarepa or Mapalotsawa. He was beaten by a shoe from his teacher, and right away he attained liberation. Unfortunately, all of our seniors over here, they don't remember the story. They don't really talk. This is a bit different. This one was taught, I believe, in words of my perfect teacher. Have you studied it before? The wise one, through examples, they would be able to come to realization with these methods. And then the Buddha continued to say that, Ananda, take for example my fist. If I don't have a hand, I couldn't make a fist. If you didn't have eyes, you couldn't see. If you apply the example of my fist to the case of your eyes, is the idea the same? Over here, there are two examples or two reference points. One is the fist, and then the other one is the eyes of Ananda. So over here it has two examples. One is the fist and the other one is the eyes of Ananda. This is using examples to demonstrate the meaning. He then said that, well, if I don't have hands, then I can't make a fist. If you don't have eyes, you can't see the fist. Then what do you think? Do you think my fist is of the same idea as your eyes? People would say that, oh, of course. If you don't have a fist, then how could I see it? If I don't have eyes, then how could I see the fist? We would agree with that. But that's not the Buddha's opinion. That's not the Buddha's teaching. Because Ananda is the Shravaka practitioner, and lots of the secret meanings given by the Buddha cannot be understood by him. In Surangama Sutra, we can see that Ananda has similar habitual patterns of understanding just as us ordinary beings. We have similar solid graspings as Ananda. So for the same reason, when the Buddha would give the direct pointing out instructions, we can also come to full realization. That is why lots of the Zen masters, they come to full realization by studying the Diamond Sutra or the Surangama Sutra. On one hand, there is the power of blessings. On the other, it is because those teachings are very close to the pointing out instructions. So they're very close. They're very directly correlated. Over here, the Buddha is asking, well, if you apply the example of my fist to the case of your eyes, is the idea the same? And then Ananda replies by saying that, yes, a world-honored one, since I can't see without my eyes, if one applies the example of the Buddha's fist to the case of your eyes, the idea is the same. So Ananda is saying that, yes, I agree. What you said is exactly right. If I don't have eyes, then there's no way for me to see the fist of the Tathagata. It is because I have eyes, therefore I can perceive the fist of the Tathagata. Similarly, if the Buddha does not have the fist, then I cannot see the fist. So he said that without the hand, then there is no fist. Without my eyes, I cannot see it. That's the Ananda's opinion. But that's not true, because we can see still without the eyes. What is seeing, according to the worldly sense, we apply the word seeing to eyes. The mind cannot see. However, the teaching over here is that the mind sees instead of the eyes. But according to the worldly beings, they would think that the seeing is only through the eyes. The mind cannot see. When you use wisdom to observe it, not only the eyes can see, most importantly, without the eyes, the mind can see as well. Relatively, we can agree that the eyes can see. However, the seeing by the eyes is not reliable. It is because the eyes are made of flesh. According to Abhidharma, it says that the reason that we can see through our eyes is because of the particular form of the eyes. And according to other schools, it says that the eye faculty has a particular type of capacity. That is why we can see. At the time of death, of course, the eye faculty will change. According to the Pramanavartika, it says that the six Ayatanas are the place where it stores the habitual patterns and then could later on being continued, could carry on to the alaya of the next lifetime. There are teachings like that too. So it is a kind of habitual pattern. But the eye consciousness on our flesh body would definitely, the eye faculty on our flesh body would definitely decay. And under the circumstances, if you really want to see, seeing by eyes is not reliable because it can decay, it can destruct, it will disappear. But if the mind sees, then the nature of mind is of the luminous Tadagata and we know that it is realization. From this aspect, it is quite profound. Therefore, the world-honored one is giving this profound teaching. So the Buddha continued to say to the Buddha, well, you say it is the same, but that is not right. The Buddha said that, well, though you say that without the eyes, then you won't be able to see. Without the hand, I won't be able to give you the sign or the formation of fist. That is not the same, and that is not right. Why is that? Because someone without a fist, someone without a hand, then obviously he won't be able to make a fist. That's correct. There are people who are, for example, amputated or without hands. Then there's no way for them to make a fist. From that point of view, then it is correct, because without hands, then how can you make fists? Over here it says if a person has no hand, his fist is gone forever. But one who is without eyes is not entirely devoid of sight. However, it is not the same as people without eyes, but they can't see. It's different. The two examples are different. Because even without eyes, someone could still see. The two examples are different. Therefore, the Buddha started to further analyze his teaching or his argument, saying that without the eyes, the person could still have seeing. It is not completely devoid of seeing. For what reason? Try consulting a blind man on the street and ask them, what do you see? So you can try to interview someone on the road. If you meet some blind people and you can ask them, so what do you see? Nowadays on our roads there are tactile pavings, and then people who don't have eyesight, they can use their stick and then they can feel the tactile paving, then they can walk and they tend to walk quite fast and smoothly. They can walk very far. They can travel back and forth as they wish. They understand where they are. They know how to walk those roads. So you can go and ask them. The Buddha is saying that. And ask them, what do you see? Any blind man will certainly answer, now I see only black in front of my eyes. Nothing else meets my gaze. If you were to ask a person, well, what are you seeing right now? And then the blind person could definitely give you the answer, I see everything black. I see darkness. Indeed, if we keep our eyes shut, unless there are some strong lights outside, we would also see darkness as well. We only see this black darkness. Therefore, whenever we go and interview some blind people and they would answer in such a way, I see only darkness, I see only black in front of my eyes. That's the object of their seeing. The meaning is apparent. If he sees blackness in front of him, how could his seeing be considered lost? Well, in this way, the Buddha is explaining that in this way of observing it, that means if the blind people sees darkness in front of themselves, how could those blind people see the object of seeing be considered as lost? How could you say that they don't have any object of seeing? It is only that for us, the ones who are not blind, we see brightness, and for people who are blind, they see darkness. That's all. We see the different object of seeing. It is not that the blind people lost the object of seeing. With our modern way of analysis, I think this is also very interesting. It is very logical. Of course, I think people without spiritual pursuit, they won't really agree with this method of logic, and they would say that, no, that's not true. They don't see anything. It's darkness. But we can also think to ourselves, whatever we are seeing, the object of our seeing is brightness, but for the blind people, they do have the object of seeing as well, but it's darkness. If you close your eyes and just try to experience it in a dark environment, you would come to that kind of understanding as well. When it's really dark at night and you can practice, you can try to feel it. Some blind people in the morning, some blind people, they have some sense of seeing. They haven't lost the complete capacity of their faculty. Therefore, they will still be able to see some kind of brightness, and sometimes it's a little bit white, sometimes it's a little bit bright, and some of them, they only see pitch black. We can use various ways to observe it, such as the teaching of Buddhist logic or Chittamatra. In fact, those are very easy to make these kinds of observation. Or with the way of the Bodhisattva, they also provide, in that text, there's also the observation on analysis as well. In the 7 ways of seeking the mind or searching for the mind, there are all kinds of observations from inside and outside to observe this mind. At the end, they will be able to see that there's nothing can be found. The eye consciousness cannot be found either. So this one has been expounded already. Then the Buddha, after talking to Ananda got a little bit embarrassed, I think. He then continues to say, the only thing blind people see in front of their eyes is blackness. How could that be seeing? We can see Ananda's understanding is very much similar to the conventional people's understanding. From the conventional point of view, nobody would say that, the blind people can see black, can see darkness. You cannot say that this is seeing. Seeing black doesn't count. And then the Buddha said to Ananda, I'll further explain, saying that there is really no difference. How so? Is there any difference between the blackness seen by blind people who do not have the use of their eyes and the blackness seen by someone who has the use of their eyes when he is in a dark room? So there are then the two groups of people. One is the blind, and then the other one is the ones with eyes in such dark room. Both of them perceives darkness. Both of them sees darkness. In front of the blind people, they sees darkness, right? Same as the ones with the use of eyes as well, because they're in a really dark room, in the complete pitch black room. Just like in Tibetan Buddhism, there's this particular type of retreat. It's called the darkness retreat. There are usually 3 layers of walls so that no brightness, no light could come in. At that time, that kind of darkness in front of blind people and in front of the people with the use of their eyes, are there any difference in terms of the object of their seeing? From the darkness point of view, are there any difference? And then Ananda had to reply in this way, saying that, so it is, world-honored one. Between the two kinds of blackness, that seen by the person in a dark room and that seen by the blind, there is no difference. So the darkness is of no difference. In terms of, or from the angle of darkness, there is really no difference. Nowadays, there are many people who can experiment on this. They did. The kind of darkness in a dark room experienced by both groups are the same. There's really no other way to answer it. They're the same. Ananda replied to this question with honesty, saying that, yes, there is no difference. Maybe because at this point, Ananda really couldn't find any way to continue to debate with the Buddha. This pointing out is a bit different than the Ati's way of pointing out. I think this kind of pointing out of the nature of mind is more logical. Ananda, the Buddha continued to say that if the person without the use of his eyes, who sees only blackness, were suddenly to regain his sight and see all kinds of forms, there are the modern operations that could bring back sights to certain types of blindness, such as cataracts, can be cured or can, after certain surgeries, be adjusted. Or some of them, they can start seeing again by placing some sort of obstacle lenses. And then they can start seeing again. There are examples of how people couldn't see before, and then after operation they can see again, and then right away, by seeing, they feel so touched they'll start to cry, maybe out of disbelief, because they haven't seen anything before in the past. Now the Buddha says that the person who couldn't see before, but out of certain kinds of causes and conditions, and suddenly were to gain his sight back, or to gain his sight and see all kinds of forms. Whatever kinds of forms, it could be family and friends, houses, or fresh flowers, and light. This person can suddenly see this. Then this person can be called, or you can say it is his eyes which can see. Now let's come back to the other person who stayed in the pitch black room. who couldn't see anything other than darkness. All of a sudden, if a lamp is lit, all of a sudden, this person can see everything in that room. Then you can call this person as this. It is the lamp which sees. At the beginning, this person in the pitch black room, he couldn't see anything, and all of a sudden someone came in with a lamp. Right away, he could see things. The first person whose eye had some problems, but out of surgery or out of different conditions, he regained his eyesight. Then we can call this person the person who can see through the eyes. And then the second was the person who stayed in the dark room who couldn't see before. And then someone came in with a lamp, and then because of the lamp, the person can see. Then we call the second person as it is a lamp which sees. If it is a case of the lamp seeing, it would be a lamp endowed with sight, which couldn't be called a lamp. And if the lamp were to do seeing, how would you be involved? If you were to say that this person cannot see, but the lamp sees, that cannot be true, because the lamp cannot be the subject of seeing, because it is of inanimate object. What's the function of the lamp then? The function of the lamp is to illuminate, so that the darkness can be expelled, and then people can see with the light that comes from the light. But for the lamp itself, it doesn't have the function to see. If it is the case of the lamp seeing, it would be a lamp endowed with sight, which couldn't be called a lamp. And if the lamp were to do the seeing, how would you be involved?
有什么关系呢？就是没有什么关系的，就是并不是是这个因为灯的原因来你见到的，灯它自己见到瓶子的，灯它自己
If you were to say that the lamp can see all the things by itself, then it has nothing to do with you.
所以从我们这个层面来讲的话呢，如果有依靠灯来见到的话呢，
So by relying on lamp to see,
灯呢就是只不过是
we should know that the lamp cannot see, rather the lamp can illuminate. And then the subject of the seer or the seer can see. The one who sees should be our own eyes or the mind. Therefore, you should know that while the lamp can reveal the forms, it is the eyes, not the lamp, that do the seeing. We know that the lamp has its function and performed its function, which is to illuminate the forms. Then as a seer, it is the eyes, but not the lamp that could see. The lamp is not the seer. The eyes are the seer. Now let's analyze it further.
就换一个角度来讲，就是其实严禁的话，
It is the eyes, not the lamp, that do the
灯
seeing.
一样的，严禁
The
不可能
Buddha
自
said.
己。如果你把这个推理呢，就是刚才，如果严禁是
With the
见者
same
的话呢，
analysis, with the same
没有必要
logic,
这个其他了。但实际上是
we're saying that the eyes are the seer, then there's no other need for anything else. According to the modern science or the Buddha's teaching, in fact, it is the same. On the particular topic of the eyes, because when we refer to the eyes are no other than this eyeball. And can this eyeball see things? Because it cannot see. If it can see, then a corpse also has those eyeballs. When a person dies, those eyeballs are still intact with the body, and then some of them, their eyes are wide open. Can they see then? So without consciousness, then the eye faculty cannot see. According to Buddhist teachings, we say that the eye faculty is the faculty that which consciousness relies, or it's a gate or a window. Without a window, we won't be able to see what's outside. But who is the one inside that sees through the window? That is us. But whenever people would talk about eyes, they would talk about the eye faculty. But the eye faculty has lots of downfalls, including some kind of yoga practices. Some teachers, they would say that, they can hear the shape of things through their ear consciousness, and they can use their eyes to hear different things through the eye faculty. Now, this is the first step of logic, where the Buddha talks about we need the people with eyes, they need to rely on the lamp to see the object of seeing. And then by relying on the eye consciousness to perceive is also part of the cause and condition. The bright fist, in fact, it can be perceived only by mind. This is quite a unique way of pointing out instruction. Ananda then said that at the beginning, it is that I can see by my eyes. And then the Buddha over here said that, in fact, it is the seeing nature comes from the mind and not the eyes. The fist of the Buddha can be perceived by Ananda in the same way. In the Ati teachings, for example, in the practice of Tokka, at the beginning you will be able to see all kinds of forms. We call it as Vajra chains. Those are seeing. Those are the different phenomena that we can perceive because of the mind. There are teachings like such in Mahayana. Over here it says that it is not the eyes that can see, it is the mind that can see. Ananda said that, I think it's my eyes can see. But the Buddha then pointed out it is not the eyes, it is the mind. If the mind can see, then it is very meaningful when it comes to pointing out the nature of mind. So that's the first pointing out of the nature. That's the first one. Then now let's look at the second way of pointing out the nature of mind. Now let's look at the second part, which talks about seeing does not move. Although over here in the sutra it says, although Ananda and everyone in the great assembly had heard what was said, their minds have not yet understood, and so they remained silent. It's like they don't really have anything to say because they can't really process that information. Also, Ananda, because he can't rebut what the Buddha taught, but he had to be silent because there is no way for him to debate back. Though that he cannot come up with a better answer, a more suitable answer, at the same time, he hasn't come to the full realization of it. He doesn't really fully understand what the Tathagata's meaning is. Just as some of our fellow practitioners over here, you're probably also half understanding it and half don't quite understand it yet. And then Ananda continued to request the Buddha to give further teachings. He said that he hopes to hear more of the gentle sounds of the Tathagata's teaching. So they put their hands together, purify their minds, and stood waiting for the Tathagata's compassionate instruction. We can see this is such a wonderful story, a wonderful demonstration of teaching. At that time, the Buddha at first curled up his fingers to make the fist and then started to give teachings by asking questions and then give the answers. And then after seeing that Ananda still don't understand, along with the great numbers of people in the assembly, Ananda requested further and saying that, could you maybe tell more? Could you maybe explain a little more? Because I don't think I quite understand what you mean. I don't think I fully understand. I don't think I attained any realization yet. Then the world-honored one extended his tula cotton webbed illuminated bright hand. So this tula cotton is a type of cotton in India back then, and it's very soft, very gentle. And then when he extended his fingers, the fingers are very soft, really gentle. He opened his 5-wheeled fingers and told Ananda and the great assembly. So over here we can see, followed by the whole scene of the teaching situation, the Buddha opened up his feast. And he started to tell the story that happened at the beginning of the first turning of the wheel. So the story goes like this. When I first accomplished the way, I went to the deer park, and for the sake of Kurunanda and all 5 of the bhikshus, the 5 original disciples, that is, as well as for you out of a 4-fold assembly. The 4-fold assembly, the 5 bhikshus, as well as bhikshus, bhikshunis, upasaka and upasikas, as the 4-fold assembly. At that time, the story continued. The Buddha continued to say that I said it is because living beings are impeded by guest dust. The following parts we will be repeating the guest dust aspect, or the adventitious stains and afflictions that they do not realize Bodhi or become arhats. And then the Buddha said, though, okay, so now the 5 bhikshus who are already now attained arhathood, who already came to realization, you know the causes and conditions which led to it. And now that you have already come to the fruition, you already have attained fruition. What's the causes and conditions which led to the fruition then? The Buddha then asked, at that time, what caused you, who have now realized the holy fruit, or the fruition of arhathood, to become enlightened? The Buddha at that time pretended not knowing the causes and conditions. Of course he knows. But the Buddha posed this question. After this question, then Kaudina started to answer this question, to address the question that's posed by Ananda, because he said that, oh, I don't understand your example, then could you maybe further explain what you mean? And now the Buddha started to give the pointing out through a story instead of an example. After this story, you should be able to understand what guest dust is, or adventitious stain, according to the lamp of certainty, a beacon of certainty, where it says that the adventitious stain, in fact, what it obscures itself, it doesn't have the nature of obscuration either. So through this way, you'll be able to come to realization. I remember a Chan master, Master Zhao Zhou, at that time when he was sweeping the floor, and then a monk came to ask him, well, why are you sweeping the floor? You're a great master. He said, the dust comes from outside, why shouldn't I sweep it? And then the monk replied by saying, this is a pure practice center, or this is a pure place. So for that reason, we can say that that monk who asked the question also had certain level of realization too. Through other people's stories, or our own stories, or Kaudina's stories, after listening to it, I'm sure these adventitious stains we will be able to gain a better understanding of what it is. The Tibetan translation of guest dust, the adventitious stain, has this meaning of guest and has the connotation of someone who comes after, but not long abiding or not staying for a long period of time. It also has the connotation of by chance. And stains or dust means it's obscuration. Our current project of Tibetan Vajrayana dictionary is ongoing. When I looked into it, it was 3 years ago on April 22nd. We established that group to work on the dictionary. But since then, we haven't worked on this adventitious stain, this particular word yet. The 6 types of dust refers to the 6 objects, the form, sound, touch, smell, and so on. So adventitious stain, adventitious, or something that comes from outside. Well, we have to talk about it. Well, dictionary, it's a big project. At that time, Venerable Kodina stood in front of the Buddha, stood up in front of the Buddha. He said that of the elders now present in the great assemblies, only I received the name understanding. In terms of elders, there are the elders of wisdom, and there are the elders of age, and there are the ones who consider themselves as elders. Kodina is considered as the elders of wisdom and precepts. So he received the name as elder. He received the name understanding because Kodina said that because I was enlightened to the meaning of the word guest dust and realized the fruition. Because the Buddha asked the question, for what causes and conditions did you attain the fruition? Then Kodina over here very proudly saying that, well, I attained fruition through adventitious stains. In our previous class on turning the illness onto the path of enlightenment, where we talked about how you can transform illness onto the path. So we can see that illness itself is not particularly something that's desirable, but once it's transformed onto the path, then it can bring about fruition. Just as Kodina received fruition after understanding adventitious stains. Kodina continued to tell his story, saying that world-honored one, it is like a traveler who stops at as a guest at a roadside hotel, perhaps for the night or perhaps for a meal. Sometimes you can see that at a hotel, you can see different guests coming in and going out. Then those guests would probably stay for 1 day or 1 night. They would stay there for a meal, for a night. But after a few days or nights, after they don't have any things to do at that place, then they will just continue to on their journey. So when he finished lounging there, or when the meal is finished, he packs his baggage and sets out again. He does not remain there at leisure because he's a guest. So why would he stay there? The host, on the other hand, would not leave. The host of hotel, of motel, of wherever the residence is, doesn't wander around. Then that's no longer called as a host. A host is someone who stays there. Consider it this way: the one who does not remain is called the guest, and the one who does remain is called the host. The word guest then means one who does not remain. So Kodina then thought in such a way and contemplated for a long time. And he came to this understanding that one who does not remain is called the guest, and the one who does remain is called the host. So he understood. The word guest means one who does not remain. This would be easy to understand when we talk about the nature of mind. The nature of mind is like the host. And then the two obscurations, obscuration of affliction and obscuration of knowledge, are considered as the guests. So the obscuration in general is considered as a guest. Bodhina attained fruition in such a way by understanding that the mind is of great purity, and the guests are the obscurations. So the guests would come and visit, and they would go. But the nature of mind is the host. But we constantly would get very much entangled by our guests and don't realize the nature of our mind. Kodina understood the nature of mind through this teaching of guest and host, and seeing the host being the nature of mind. The great masters like such, including Kodina, whom we call them Shravakas and Arhats, but even to them, they came to understanding, they came to the fruition by understanding of obstacles. And they know that obstacles are only occasional, it is not forever. So that's one aspect. And then the second aspect says in the sutra, again, when the sky clears up, for example, after the rain, the sky should be really clear, very bright. After the rain, especially nowadays since we had lots of rain and snow, the sky is really bright. Much more clear, without any obstacles, completely pure. It is just like the sky after it clears up. After that, when the sun starts to shine in the sky, and then the sunlight comes through from the windows or skylight, whenever there is light, then you look through those lights and look up to the sky, you would see there are lots of little specks of dust. Though that the sky is really clear after the rain, and then in the sunlight, when you look through the sunlight that comes through the window, we see some dust. Sometimes we see the dust of light, and sometimes we see lots of dust in our environment, and sometimes there are little specks of dust, and those can be perceived under the sunlight. Then at that time, we see that the nature of those dusts are constantly moving, but the sky is always there without any movement. Maybe Kodina at that time had a guest, and then after the guest left, he saw the sunlight, and then he saw the dust that is moving. But the sky is not moving. So the space or sky refers to our mind, the nature of our mind, which is not moving. The adventitious stain, the dust, is moving. But what's not moving is the nature of our mind. So after contemplating upon that, he understood that. So the nature of dust is empty. The moving particles are called dust. So that's the meaning of dust. The moving and not moving, the dust and the space reviewed the relation between obscuration and the nature of mind. That's how Kodina came to the understanding or came to the attainment of fruition through guest and dust. Next time, whenever people ask you, well, what is guest dust? And could you explain to me? Then you can ask them to go and read the story in Surangama Sutra. The Buddha specifically then expounded the story of Kodina. That's how Kodina came to the fruition. That's how he attained arhathood. Including in the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, there are stories of Shariputra and Vajrayana and how they came to the attainment of fruition as well. And then the Buddha replied by saying, "So it is, so it is." The Buddha then agreed that is the story, that is the causes and conditions of how Kodina came to the attainment of fruition. Now we finished the second pointing out of the 10 pointing out.
Chubum sonen joa joa